From betrayal to shock, CEO finds his ex-wife and their hidden childs in the rain. Peace and blessings, beautiful souls. Welcome to Alcott Stories, where every tale is woven with love, emotion, and a touch of magic. Before we begin today's heartfelt journey, let's take a moment to whisper a small prayer. May every listener hear find light in the story, healing in the words, and strength in every ending. Amen. If this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and join the Alcott Stories family, because here, emotions aren't just told, they're felt. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a moment of the magic. Drop a comment below and tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know how far Alcott Stories is reaching. Your presence truly means the world. When Ariel Monroe walked into Walker & Co. for her first day as a brand strategist, she didn't just step into a new job. She unknowingly stepped into the beginning of a story that would shift destinies. Her confident stride, accented by the subtle sway of her curls and the fire in her brown eyes, turned heads in the office, but none more intensely than the man behind the glass wall, Ethan Walker, the youngest CEO the company had ever seen. Known for his razor-sharp mind, crisp navy blue suits, and that unshakable calm, Ethan had seen many people come and go, but something about Ariel stilled his world. Their first handshake was electric, almost like the air itself had paused to listen. Ariel had a voice that danced when she spoke, light, warm, and intelligent, while Ethan's was deep and composed, laced with authority and a hint of mystery. In meetings, they sat across the table, exchanging ideas that bounced like fire and silk. During coffee breaks, they lingered a little longer each day, talking about books, memories, music, and childhood dreams, like old souls meeting again after lifetimes apart. Ethan found himself glancing at her even when he didn't mean to, admiring how the late afternoon sun painted golden strokes across her glowing brown skin, and how she laughed freely, as if no one had ever tried to cage her spirit. Ariel, in return, noticed the way Ethan's eyes softened when he listened, those striking blue eyes, intense yet kind, focused entirely on her like nothing else in the world mattered. Their connection was a slow flame, warm, persistent, steady. After work, they'd walk through the city, sometimes in silence, sometimes lost in conversation, but always with a closeness that felt louder than words. Ariel would speak about her mother's old vinyl records, about growing up in a neighborhood where stars could still be seen. Ethan confessed his fear of failure, of being defined by a title instead of passion. He wasn't just a CEO to her, he was a man with layers, with quiet pain and unspoken poetry. She wasn't just an employee to him. She was color in a world he didn't know had faded. One late evening, after staying back to finish a pitch, they stood near the office window as the city lights blinked below like scattered constellations. Ethan, standing closer than usual, brushed a curl away from Ariel's cheek, his touch slow, careful, almost trembling. She looked up at him, searching for answers she wasn't ready to ask. And in that quiet moment, the air changed. Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper, low and rough, from emotions held back. "There's no one else I'd rather be with," he said, his words falling between them like promises and apologies all at once. Ariel didn't reply, not with words. Her eyes met his with something equally fragile and powerful, the beginnings of surrender. From that night forward, they were no longer just two people bound by work. They were souls orbiting each other, drawing closer in tiny steps, each smile a magnet, each conversation a thread. They'd find reasons to be near, accidentally, bumping into each other in the break room, sending quick texts during meetings, waiting for everyone to leave so they could steal one more moment. There was no confession yet, no lines crossed, but they were already falling in ways neither fully admitted. And somewhere deep down, both of them knew that this was no ordinary friendship. This was something rare, unwritten, unpredictable, and on the edge of becoming something far greater than either expected. From that moment onward, everything changed between them. It was as though the world had quietly shifted to give them room to breathe, to love in secret, away from prying eyes and whispered judgments. The bond they shared, so quietly powerful, thrived in those unspoken moments when no one was watching, when it was just Ethan and Ariel, two souls who had found something neither had expected, but both desperately needed. Their friendship evolved into something more, and they both felt it happening, like the shift of seasons. It started with secret glances, those quiet, lingering looks across the office that would leave Ariel's heart fluttering, her breath catching as if the world was holding its breath too. In the evenings, when the office cleared out, Ethan would linger behind, waiting for her to leave so they could slip away unnoticed. The first phone call came one evening, just after the sun dipped below the skyline. His voice was a soft murmur through the receiver, as though he couldn't wait to hear her speak. "You didn't leave today," he said, his words laced with an unspoken question. Ariel smiled, leaning against the window. "I couldn't," she whispered, her voice trembling. They talked for hours, their conversation ranging from meaningless chatter to confessions neither had expected to make. It felt safe. Their shared moments in the darkness of night, when no one was watching, when it was just them and the quiet hum of the city outside. These calls became their lifeline, an invisible thread connecting them through the distance. But as the days turned into weeks, their connection deepened, became more undeniable, more intense. Then came the first stolen date, nothing extravagant, just a quiet dinner at a luxury downtown hotel, far enough from the office to be hidden, but close enough to feel real. Ariel, in a simple black dress that hugged her curves just right, looked as though she belonged to the evening sky itself. Ethan was no longer the polished CEO in his office attire. He was just a man, captivated by the woman sitting across from him, her eyes glowing in the soft candlelight. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers, and for a moment the world felt still. It wasn't grand gestures or loud declarations. It was the quiet comfort of their presence in each other's company. As dinner came to a close, Ethan stood offering his hand, and Ariel took it, a silent agreement passing between them. They walked together through the hotel lobby, out into the night, their footsteps echoing in perfect synchrony. The world outside was loud, but in that space between them, it was only their hearts that spoke. Ethan, with a tenderness Ariel had never expected from him, pulled her close, his arms enveloping her like a safe cocoon. He kissed her forehead softly, and in that moment, all the doubts and insecurities that lingered vanished, replaced by the certainty of what they shared. "This," he whispered, "this is home." The words, simple yet profound, held weight in the air between them. Ariel closed her eyes, her heart racing. Home. The word was a promise, a soft echo of everything she had secretly longed for. In the quiet glow of the hotel room, in the softness of his touch, Ariel found herself surrendering to him, to the love that had blossomed between them in silence. Their kisses were slow and careful, every touch deliberate, every movement a silent conversation they didn't need to speak aloud. It wasn't about the rush of passion, it was about the deep, undeniable connection that had been forged without them even realizing it. They stayed hidden from the world, not because they didn't want to shout their love from the rooftops, but because Ethan had his reasons, office gossip, reputations, expectations. But for Ariel, it wasn't about the world's approval. It was about him, about the way he made her feel like the center of his universe, like she was the only one who mattered. She saw in his eyes the love he couldn't express aloud, and that was enough. They were both caught in a world of their own, where the rules of society couldn't reach them. And though they stayed hidden, though their love was quiet and secret, it was real, deeper than anything they'd ever known. They didn't need grand gestures or applause. What they had was theirs alone, soft and tender, but real enough to carry them through whatever the future might hold. The days passed like whispers between them, soft and intimate, as though the universe had crafted only this moment for them to exist in. Each stolen touch, each lingering glance held more weight, more meaning, as their love deepened into something neither had anticipated. Their connection was no longer just something hidden in the quiet corners of their lives. It became the thread that held them together, weaving through each shared glance, every shared laugh, and every touch that said more than words ever could. Between them, time felt like it had no hold, no power, At the office, they were colleagues, exchanging polite smiles and casual words. But outside those walls, in the hidden spaces of their lives, they were lovers, completely, utterly lost in each other. Even the mundane became magic when they were together, running errands, sitting in cafes, walking through the streets under the soft glow of streetlights. Every moment spent together was a stolen treasure. And when their worlds collided in the intimacy of her apartment, nothing else seemed to matter. Between the sheets, the air was thick with longing, yet their love was tender, passionate but gentle, as if they were both discovering something new every time. His hands would roam over her skin like a map he knew by heart, but still wanted to trace with reverence. Ariel's touch was like fire, igniting something inside him he couldn't name. And yet, despite the intensity, there was always a softness to their connection, a warmth that was more than just physical. It was emotional, spiritual, an undeniable bond that neither could deny. But on one rainy evening, as the storm raged outside, it felt as if the world had paused to watch them. The city around them slept in oblivion, while they lived in a world of their own, intimate, warm, and full of promise. Ariel stood by the window, her back to him, watching the rain fall in sheets, tapping softly against the glass. The city lights outside flickered in the distance, but in that room, in that moment, it was just them. Ethan moved toward her, his presence steady and calming, and for the first time in weeks, he let the weight of his emotions take over. He didn't want to hide anymore. He didn't want to run from the truth they both knew but hadn't said aloud. His hand gently brushed against her arm, sending a shiver down her spine. Ariel turned to him, her eyes soft, but with that same intensity she always had when they were alone. "Ethan," she whispered, but he silenced her with a finger to her lips. He moved closer, pulling her into his arms with a gentleness that belied the passion bubbling just beneath the surface. She felt his heartbeat against her chest, steady, strong, but somehow nervous, as if he too feared the intensity of what they were becoming. His lips hovered just above hers, and for a moment time stood still. This moment, he thought, this is what I want. This is where I belong. He kissed her slowly, deeply, as if the kiss would erase every doubt, every worry they had ever carried. His lips moved over hers with a hunger, a desperation, but also a tenderness that took her breath away. He pulled back for just a moment, his forehead resting against hers. "I want this moment to last forever," he whispered, his voice raw, vulnerable, like a man unmasking the very core of himself. Ariel closed her eyes, feeling the depth of his words. She didn't need anything more. There were no more doubts, no more fears. All that existed in that space, in that kiss, was a love that had surpassed all the barriers they had once built around themselves. He kissed her again, this time more urgently, as if the very air they breathed was running out, and they both needed to inhale each other completely. Their bodies, pressed together, moved in perfect rhythm, the heat between them building slowly, a crescendo of longing and desire. It wasn't just the fire that burned between them, it was the promise of something deeper, something more meaningful. As the rain continued to drum against the window, the world outside disappeared. There was only them. In the warmth of that room, their love grew, blossomed, unspoken but undeniable. Neither of them could ever have imagined that this would be their reality. But in that moment, it didn't matter. They were together, and that was enough. The warmth they had shared, the whispered promises, and the stolen moments now felt like a distant memory, fading into the cold reality that Ariel had never expected. She had dreamed of forever with him, of building, something more than the quiet, stolen kisses and hidden hotel rooms. To her, the love they shared was more than just passion. It was a connection that went deeper, something that felt like destiny. But to Ethan, things were changing. Slowly, subtly, he began to withdraw, as if the weight of their secret world was too much to carry. The pressure from his family, the expectations from the company, the image he had to maintain, it all started to seep into their moments together. The once comfortable silences between them began to feel heavy, his gestures less frequent, his words carefully chosen. Ariel noticed it first in the way his eyes, once filled with warmth whenever they were together, grew distant like a door closing without a sound. She tried to reach him, to bridge the gap that seemed to widen each day. But it was as if something had changed within him, something that left her standing on the other side, confused and broken. Then one fateful morning, she awoke in the same hotel room where they had shared their most intimate moments. And the silence felt different. It was too quiet, too final. She reached for him, but the bed beside her was empty. Her heart sank as she found the note, written in his familiar hand, but carrying words she never thought she'd hear. "I can't do this. I'm sorry." Her breath caught in her throat as the weight of those words crushed her chest. The room seemed to spin, and for the first time in their love story, she felt utterly alone. She couldn't understand it. How could everything they had shared vanish so quickly, so decisively? She clutched the note to her chest, as if holding on to those last fragments of him, but no matter how tight she held it, it couldn't bring him back. The door closed, and with it the world they had built together fell apart. Days turned to weeks, then months, and still no word from him. Ariel disappeared from the life they had shared. No calls, no goodbyes, just a gaping hole where love once bloomed. She needed to find herself again, away from the memories, away from the betrayal that had shattered her heart. She retreated into the shadows of her own life, cutting herself off from the man she had once believed was her everything. Meanwhile, Ethan moved on publicly, throwing himself into his work, taking on new projects, and attending social events with the same poised confidence he always had. But in those fleeting moments when no one was watching, there was something in his eyes, something broken, something lost. Despite his outward success, despite the facade he had built, Ariel knew deep down that he was living with the weight of his own regret. He had let her go, and in doing so he had lost a piece of himself. But the pain of the choice he had made was buried beneath the polished image he presented to the world, hidden behind the smiles and the facades he wore like armor. He would never admit it, but he missed her laugh, the way she challenged him, the way her presence made everything feel a little less heavy. But the life he had chosen, the one he had always been expected to live, left no room for the love he had once so effortlessly given to Ariel. And as he moved forward, pretending that nothing had ever been broken, Ariel was somewhere out there, trying to heal, trying to move on. The clouds hung low over the city that day, casting a muted silver glow across the streets as raindrops tapped rhythmically on Ethan's windshield. He had been driving aimlessly, unable to shake the unease that had followed him all week, like a shadow creeping just beyond his reach. The success he wore like a badge felt hollow today, his finely tailored suit clinging slightly damp to his frame. As he stepped out of the car, he wasn't expecting anything, just a brief walk, some air to shake off the gnawing emptiness. But then, as he crossed the quiet street, he heard laughter, bright, free, and familiar in a way that hit him square in the chest. His eyes followed the sound and landed on a woman standing just beyond the trees, her figure wrapped in a simple coat, soaked slightly by the drizzle, her hair still as wild and beautiful as he remembered. And around her danced 3 children, their tiny boots splashing through puddles, shrieking with joy as rain kissed their skin. Time stopped. His breath caught as he took in the curve of her cheek, the grace in her posture, the way her eyes lifted to the sky with peace etched across her face. Then she turned, and the world tilted. "Ariel?" he breathed, barely audible over the rain, his voice trembling. She stood still, meeting his gaze, her eyes no longer soft and searching, but clear, strong, and unwavering. She looked like someone who had learned how to rise. Her beauty stunned him, more striking now, matured by pain, refined by experience, regal in a way that made him suddenly feel small. But it wasn't just her presence that made his heart stumble. It was the children, 3, each with familiar curls, storm blue eyes, and a grin that mirrored the one he used to see in his own reflection. His heart pounded against his ribs, his hands trembled, his mind raced. Those kids, they looked like me. Before he could speak, before he could even reach for a coherent thought, Ariel stepped forward with poise that shook him to his core. "We need to talk," she said firmly, and the simplicity of her words cut through the noise of the rain, slicing clean into the silence that had hung between them for half a decade. Her voice didn't crack. There was no bitterness in her tone, just truth, power, and a hint of something deeper. The children clung to her legs, curious, their laughter fading into confusion as they sensed the tension in the air. Ethan's world spun wildly, his eyes locked with the oldest child's. Those eyes. His eyes stared back at him with innocent wonder. Emotions surged in his chest, disbelief, guilt, awe, and something else he couldn't yet name. The street, once quiet, now thundered with the sound of his heartbeat. He opened his mouth, but words betrayed him. What could he say? That he was sorry? That he hadn't known? That for 5 years he had believed she was just a chapter closed? Ariel didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't crumble. Instead, she held her head high, her gaze unblinking, giving him the chance to see what he had missed, not just the children, but the woman she had become. A storm brewed inside him, equal parts regret and wonder. The air between them thickened with unspoken truths, and beneath the falling rain, the past and present collided in a single, soul-rattling moment that would change everything. The cafe was dimly lit, the windows fogged slightly from the rain outside, casting a muted golden glow across the quiet space, as if the universe itself had paused to witness what was about to unfold. They sat across from each other, a silence so thick between them it could be sliced with a knife. Ethan's hands trembled slightly around the untouched coffee cup before him, while Ariel sat poised, her expression unreadable but her eyes speaking volumes. Eyes that had once looked at him with adoration, now holding a storm of strength, pain and a guarded vulnerability. Her fingers were clasped tightly in her lap, as if holding together the pieces of herself that had been shattered long ago. She didn't rush into anger or theatrics. Instead, she spoke with a calm that chilled Ethan more than any scream could have. She told him everything. How the day he disappeared, she found herself spiraling into a loneliness so sharp it left her breathless. How she discovered her pregnancy not long after and cried for nights on the cold floor of a friend's apartment, too ashamed to call him, too hurt to beg for answers. She had stood in hospital rooms alone, watched 3 tiny lives enter the world without the man who helped create them. She spoke of exhaustion, of learning how to warm bottles at 3 a.m. while weeping in silence, of rocking 3 babies while her body ached and her heart splintered. But she also spoke of strength, how those children became her reason to breathe, how she found courage in the most unlikely moments, and how she slowly rose from the wreckage of her heartache to build something whole. "You walked away, Ethan," she said, her voice neither cruel nor kind, just truth spoken like a blade. "You made a choice. I made mine." Her words echoed in his mind, reverberating through every bone in his body. Ethan sat frozen, his carefully constructed world unraveling at the seams. His eyes brimmed with tears, and he didn't try to hide them. "I never stopped loving you," he whispered hoarsely, his voice breaking. "I was a coward. I let fear speak louder than love. I didn't know how to fight for us, and I lost everything." Ariel didn't respond right away. She looked past him through the window, watching the rain cascade like time refusing to be reversed. And then small footsteps pattered toward them. The triplets peeked inside the cafe, their cheeks pressed to the glass, eyes wide with curiosity. One of them, Elias, stepped closer, blue eyes identical to Ethan's locked on the man inside. Ethan turned slowly, the breath leaving his lungs in a shudder. He stared at the boy, at the curve of his smile, the shape of his chin, the very reflection of himself. And in that instant, something inside him cracked open. He wasn't just grieving a lost love anymore, he was staring at the years he'd missed, the bedtime stories he'd never told, the scraped knees he hadn't kissed, the birthdays he hadn't celebrated. He didn't know whether to reach out or fall apart. Ariel watched him carefully, her eyes softening just enough to betray the armor she wore. "They don't know you," she said quietly, "but they know love. And if you want to be in their lives, it starts with truth, not grand gestures." Her strength both humbled and haunted him. Ethan nodded slowly, wiping his face as tears continued their silent trail. He had once broken her, but she had not only rebuilt herself, she had created 3 lives filled with joy. She had done what he had failed to do. She had stayed. And now, as they sat in that quiet cafe, amidst the hum of rain and heartache, something began to shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the fragile beginning of a new chapter, rooted in raw truth and the smallest hope of redemption. The weeks that followed unfolded like slow, careful brushstrokes on a blank canvas. No promises, no shortcuts, only presence and effort. Ethan didn't come with flowers or grand declarations. Instead, he came with patience. He began showing up at Ariel's door with coloring books, at school pickup lines where the triplets would glance at him shyly, and at local parks where he learned how to braid his daughter's curls and how to soothe tantrums with gentle words instead of money. Ariel watched from a distance at first, wary but observant, noticing how he no longer led with charm, but with humility. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He built trust brick by brick, showing up not as a savior, but as a man trying to become better, for them and for himself. Meanwhile, Ariel had already been crafting a life far from the shadows of abandonment. With sleepless nights and iron resolve, she launched her own marketing agency, Monroe Media, which quickly gained attention for its bold campaigns and authentic voice. She turned her pain into power, her solitude into a sanctuary for growth. Clients praised her brilliance. Her staff admired her leadership, and her children, who had once known only her, now saw her as a storm of beauty and strength. Ethan began consulting quietly behind the scenes, never overshadowing her but always supporting her vision. He handled logistics, coached her team on strategy, and listened during long brainstorming sessions. They became partners, not just in co-parenting, but in rebuilding something that felt real, earned and grounded. Slowly, the walls Ariel had built began to crack, not from his pressure, but from her own willingness to believe in healing. The triplets started calling him Dad on their own terms, and with every whispered bedtime story and every scraped knee he patched up, Ethan learned the kind of love that didn't need noise to be true. Then came the night of the awards gala. The ballroom was awash in gold light, filled with titans of industry and creative minds, but all eyes turned when Ariel stepped on stage in a sleek, crimson gown that mirrored her fire. Her curls framed her proud face, her voice calm and commanding as she stood behind the podium. Ethan stood just beneath the stage, with the triplets at his side, his chest swelling not with pride for himself, but for the woman he had once lost and now learned to honor. Ariel's speech was not soaked in bitterness nor wrapped in apology. It was a testament to rebirth. "I stand here," she said, her gaze sweeping across the room. "Not because someone saved me, but because I chose to save myself. I was left behind, yes, but I didn't stay there. I rose, and I learned that love doesn't always come back the way you expect it, but when it does, if it comes with respect and truth, maybe it's worth a second look." Her eyes found Ethan then, and the pause felt eternal. "I don't need saving," she said with quiet strength, "but I'm glad you chose to walk beside me this time." The applause erupted, but the only sound Ethan heard was the beating of his own heart, humbled and full. As she stepped down, the triplets broke free, running up the stage giggling, their joy lighting up the room. Ariel bent down to embrace them, and Ethan joined her, not out of entitlement but invitation. He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't let go. The past didn't vanish. It stood behind them like a shadow. But it no longer controlled their light. They had rewritten their story, not by pretending it hadn't broken, but by proving that love rebuilt with truth could be even stronger. As cameras flashed and the room roared, they stood together, not as a fantasy, not as a rescue, but as a family forged in resilience. Love Now Reborn lived in their laughter, their work, and the strength of a woman who chose her own rise, and a man who finally understood what it meant to walk beside her. Not ahead,